Hello and welcome to this episode of Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's episode, we meet Woman Farmer of the Year finalist Wanda Patsche at her farm in Welcome, Minnesota to discuss pig farming, internet blogging, and agricultural education. JoAnn Lower shares a new ducktail with us, and the University of Minnesota Extension provides us with a new best practices segment. All here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections made possible in part by
Absolute Energy. A locally owned facility produces 125 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood. Minnesota Corn Growers Association, working to identify and promote opportunities for corn growers, enhance quality of life, and help others understand the value and importance of corn production to America's economy. EDP Renewables North America, owner-operator of Prairie Star and Pioneer Prairie Wind Farms, Minnesota and Iowa. EDPR wind farms and solar parks provide income to farmers and help power rural economies across the continent.
Welcome to Farm Connections. I'm near Welcome, Minnesota with Wanda Patsche. Wanda, welcome to Farm Connections.
Thank you. I'm glad you could come visit my farm.
Well, it's an honor. And we're here to talk about an honor you might get. You've been nominated for a very prestigious award. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have been nominated by a neighbor of mine as a top 5 finalist for the Farm Fest Farm Woman of the Year. It's quite an honor. I did not expect this, but it's really quite exciting.
It is exciting. And tell us about the competition.
Yeah, so the competition we will have Thursday at Farm Fest. I believe it starts at 10 o'clock. They're going to have a Farm Women's Forum where there'll be some other farm women there answering questions. And then after that forum, then they will have all top 5 finalists up on the stage. And yeah, they'll pick a winner from the top 5. So.
Well, that's from all across Minnesota, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, there's a lot of reasons I can think of that you'd be nominated, but you're really, really active in agriculture and also advocating for agriculture. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have a passion for agriculture. It's kind of funny in a sense because I never grew up on a farm. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story because I really didn't even want to marry a hog farmer. So back when I was in high school, my best friend lived on a hog farm just outside of Fairmont. And like best friends do, we would stay overnight at each other's home. And so one night I stayed overnight at her house, but she had to get up the next morning, and because her family had hogs, she still had to go out and do hog chores, which meant, cleaning out the pig pen. So I said, you know what? I said, I'll come and watch you, but I'm not going to help. I'll just come watch. So I did. I went out and watched her do her chores, and when she finished, I said to her, I will never marry a hog farmer. So we laugh about it yet today. I think God was probably up there laughing at me because he knew very well what I would be doing with my life. So.
Wanda, you seem so genuine, and you also live on a working farm.
Yes.
Tell us what you do on this farm.
Yeah, so as far as like the crops in the spring, I work up the ground ahead of the planter. This last spring, actually last couple of springs, I've actually planted soybeans. So that was fun to plant the soybeans. And then in the fall, I am the combine operator. And I will tell you that is the best job ever. I will not give that job up. I love combining. So I combine the crops, and then after I'm done with that, then I work up the ground. I do the tillage after harvesting the crop. So that's what I do with the crops. So.
Are there any management things like record keeping and ordering supplies and paying bills?
Yes, and that's the most important. In fact, when I'm done here, I'm heading to my office and I'm going to be paying bills. I do the record keeping, so I'll do the closeouts for the hogs, so we kind of know where cost of production is. I'll help with the marketing and, as far as selling for hogs and selling for the corn and soybeans. So I'm involved in that too.
Well, not only does your work take a lot of energy and your family and the work you do in the community, but also the educational work. How do you regenerate? How do you learn more?
Sure. I'm really missing a lot of the ag conferences that we used to have, before COVID. I just went to one here probably a couple of weeks ago. It was the LEAP conference that's sponsored by Farm Bureau. And I can't tell you how good it felt to be with people that I know, and that we could talk, you know, and that has the same, you know, value, same interest, and to learn. So that's one way I do it. I also think that when I look in the past, when it comes to education, I was part of the MARO program, which is the Minnesota Ag Rural Leadership Program. I will tell you that that was life-changing for me. I will tell you it's basically a 1.5-year program. Monthly we would get together for 2 to 3 days, and we would learn leadership, education. We would visit different areas in Minnesota. And I never went to one session where I felt in my comfort zone, which is a good thing because I'm an introvert, right? So it really pushed me to my limits, and it definitely changed me from the beginning to the end. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would go to Vietnam, which was our international study. I mean, when I still think about it, bike riding in rural Vietnam and visiting this farm, I mean, it was just something I could never have imagined. So definitely love the education, the leadership skills I learned there. Life-changing. Before I started the MARO program, I would have been the person that would have said, you know, I think maybe this needs to happen or that needs to happen, but never would do anything about it. After MARO, I was the person that said, you know what, that needs to happen. How are we going to do this? Let's get it done. You know, so for me personally, that's what I came out of it. So, and great friendships and great networking. So.
Great investment in MARO to
Yes.
you, but also great investment from you into the program.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes, you're welcome.
Wanda, give us some tips on how consumers can learn more about farming, more about agriculture, and then how to move through your blog and website.
Sure. Absolutely. I would say visit my Facebook page, which is Minnesota Farm Living. I've got a lot of great information there, and also my blog, which is at mnfarmliving.com, all one word. And in there, once you go to my blog or to my website, you're going to see that I have different categories. So if you want to learn more about agriculture, if you want to know more about rural farm living, you know, I even have a few recipes out there. So I try to, that's really kind of one of the things I decided when I decided to name it Minnesota Farm Living, because it really encompasses a lot of different areas when you talk about living on a farm. So that way, give me some flexibility. So yeah, and a lot of, you know, basically evergreen information, which is something that just doesn't change. I talk about, you know, how we raise our pigs, why we do what we do, you know, what are like the top 10 questions people have about raising pigs, that sort of thing. But then I'm going to also get into some of the more current topics. And so right now, I would say probably one of the most current issues that we're facing that people want to know more about is the Proposition 12. And so this is a ballot initiative that was created from the state of California. And basically what it says is that they have strict requirements of housing regulations on farm animals. And if you don't follow them, you cannot sell animals or any of the pork into their state. So as an example, with how it is set up right now, no one in California would be able to buy pork that come from my farm. So unfortunately, from a farmer's perspective, it's frustrating because the people in California were able to vote on that, but they had no background information on what they were voting for. I'm sure how it was set up, I would probably have voted for it, to be honest with you. I mean, that's kind of how things are set up. But when you have no background information about how we raise animals and you're able to vote on that, and yeah, so it's going to cause a lot of issues, because even to companies that we like, our meat packer, Hormel, they're going to have to keep the meat separate. And this ballot initiative has nothing to do with the meat quality. It's all about how the sows are housed, and it's not how the meat animals are housed or how we're taking care of those. But it's going to have a major impact, you know. And for us to make those changes, we're talking probably millions of dollars of, you know, improvements and adding onto your buildings and equipment changes and that sort of thing. So that's a big one right now that people are inquiring on. In fact, just yesterday I had somebody ask me about that and actually shared that article to me and said, have you seen this? I'm going, oh yeah, I've been following it. So they actually have tried to have even the Supreme Court take a look at it, and the Supreme Court won't take a look at it because of that interstate commerce. Like, can one state tell another state how to raise their animals or how to, you know, produce the food? So that's a big one.
What would happen if for example, your farm and many farms like yours went out of production of food, what would happen?
Yeah, I'd like to know. I mean, we would not have the pork here, and you'd be looking at, importing pork from other countries, and I don't think anybody wants that. I mean, I think everybody would prefer to buy their meat and their food from the United States. I really believe that, because we know how it's raised and how it's growing, right? And so if all of these, if we don't have the hog farms, yeah, you'll have some people that will probably say, okay, I'll just not eat pork anymore. But a lot of people are still going to want that pork, so they're going to try to get it from somewhere. Prices would definitely go up in the grocery store, no question about that. So
it's pork, but you could put that across any commodity,
absolutely,
any food group, really.
Absolutely, absolutely, not just pork. Yep.
And yes, quality is very important, but reliable supply is essential.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So sometimes it's those things that we kind of take for granted.
We do. We're well fed.
Yep, we are. And yeah, and then one of the things that we learned out of the whole COVID situation is just, and it's not just the hog industry, but we are so efficient in how we raise these pigs, but we're very vulnerable. So when there's a little, if there's a hiccup in there, it just messes everything up. Because I mean, for example, like the pigs that we're going to be getting here tomorrow, these pigs were bred, 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago, you know what I mean? And so they're coming, whether we want them or not, they're coming, which is very efficient. I mean, you're just right down, we're as efficient as you can be, but then all of a sudden something like COVID happens, and then you're just like, whoa. So
it sounds like you're asking us to think, and to think and learn.
Yes.
And then apply what we think and learn.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really what I try to do with the advocacy that I, really try to promote. It's just really to communicate, with what's going on here, and just put a face to farming, So I think that's just so important.
Well, you talked about being efficient in producing food.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about putting buildings together that made quality products and also efficiency.
Yes.
If regulations come along and say, this is how you need to do it, and it increases the cost, does that make food available to all economic groups, or does it change that?
Exactly, because some people will say, well, I'll just buy and I have no problem with this, I'll just go to my local farmer and, go with a niche market, and I will pay whatever it takes to get this, this food. That's okay if you're able to do that, but then we've also got to think about those that really are, are challenged a little bit when it comes to economics. What I do is I think about that single mom that has 3 kids that are trying to feed their family. And so that's what I focus on, that we have to have an affordable, quality food source for them too. So, consumers have a choice. They can buy whatever they want, and I promote that 100%. But we can't forget about those that really need to have that support from us. So
not everybody can afford the top end.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep, yep.
Well, I salute the quality work you do.
Thank
Any
you.
last advice for our consumers and also the audience?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, when it comes to any questions that you have about your food, reach out to a farmer. And just ask. I just think that will be so valuable, and that's really what I try to promote. So.
And you do it well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Farm Connections Best Practices, brought to you by
I'm Nathan Druitz, your local extension educator for crops in Stearns, Benton, and Morrison counties, and this is today's Best Practices segment. Today we're going to talk a little bit about drought-stressed corn grain and corn silage and taking those for forage sources here in late summer, early fall. In this case here, most of us, especially here in central Minnesota, or where I'm currently standing, but all over the state, we're currently seeing the effects of drought stress on both corn grain fields and corn silage fields. And so we need to be prepared to deal with this, especially in terms of how we're going to handle this at this fall when we go to harvest. So the first consideration, the first thing we need to be looking at is evaluating the field as a whole. So in this case here, we have corn at 3 different stages and 3 different levels of growth. We have the really short stuff. This is the stuff that's actually not under the irrigation pivot, and that's what's currently all around me here. And this is really, you're seeing a lot of burnt, you're seeing a lot of flaring up, and so we need to keep that in mind. Once you start getting a little closer to the irrigation pivot, we start noticing that we start seeing tassels as well as ears that are coming into play, as well as on the stuff under the irrigation pivot itself, where, well, we're still seeing some of that flaring up due to nitrate concerns as well as the heat that we've had and the lack of moisture. We are still seeing quite a nice ear, and that will help us out as we get ready to harvest this stuff for forage. So in the case here, what we're really looking for is those corn plants that do have an ear attached to them, and what we're going to be looking for is whether they pollinated or not. And so in this case, what we're going to want to do is we're going to pull back those husks, we're going to turn that ear on its side, and we're going to want to give it a light shake. The idea here is that if the silks fall off of that corn cob relatively easily, that indicates pollination. If it doesn't, that indicates that it's not pollinated. Relatively simple. In this instance here, if we do have a ear that has been pollinated, we are going to try to get that ear and let that ear develop for as long as we can, as that will help us store a lot of the nutrient and help bring up the forage quality in that silage at the end of the season. The big thing here is that with drought stress, we actually don't see necessarily a drop in forage quality as long as we have that ear. We don't necessarily see that drop in forage quality, but we are going to see that drop in actual yields. And so when we're looking to harvest this stuff, we will have a much tighter margin for error this year in harvesting corn silage versus previous years, including the grain. And this is why making sure that we are actually testing our corn silage and corn grain, if you're looking for it, for the whole plant moisture, so that way we harvest it at the right moisture for the proper storage unit that you have. For this area, typically when I think of harvesting for bags or bunkers, we're thinking of that 65 to 70% moisture. For upright silos, we're thinking in terms of the 60 to 65% moisture. So when we're looking at corn moisture in this case, there are a few different ways that you could do that. My personal favorite is using the Koster tester that I have, but for most of you, if you're doing this on farm, you could do this with a microwave oven or a dehydrator, or any form along those lines that you might have on farm to help you dry that plant biomass out. And really what you're looking at is that fraction that dries out versus the fraction that remains. I will caution that if you're using something like a microwave oven or an actual microwave itself, that you make sure you don't cook the silage when you're testing it. Of course, the second option is to go ahead and send that into a lab and have them run the samples for moisture as well, and that will give you an idea as to where you're currently at. The next consideration is probably the most important one, and that is on nitrates. So one of the things that we have happen with the corn silage when it's drought stressed like this is we do have accumulations of nitrates, especially in that lower third of that plant. And this is important because nitrates can cause issues or even death in livestock as we go along here. In this instance here, if you're going to be harvesting especially a lot of this shorter stuff, and we haven't had any rain, and you haven't had any rain in a while, you may not necessarily care too much about taking a nitrate sample prior to feeding and prior to harvest, but you will want to collect a nitrate sample and submit that to your local lab once you get ready to feed that out. And that's mainly because in the ensiling process that corn silage goes through will remove between 30 and 50% of the nitrates in that corn silage. The other aspects that we need to be thinking about as well is that if you do have a field where you are concerned about nitrates, you can run that through before you harvest and get a nitrate level for that, and then you can also adjust then that cutting height as you see fit. In the case of a lot of our silage this year, I think we're going to be looking at we will be looking at a lot of growers who are going to be trying to get as much out of the fields as possible, and so that might not be feasible. But again, there are options there if you do need to reduce the nitrate concentration in these tissues. Finally, the final thing that we need to be looking at is if you are in a situation where you are going to be harvesting some of this corn for silage earlier than you would expect. In some cases, I know in the central parts of Morrison County as well as chunks of Stearns County here, we have had some fields that are being opened up. You will want to make sure that you check the label on any pesticides that have been sprayed over the course of the season and make sure that you're following the harvest restriction intervals for those particular pesticides. I'm Nathan Druitz, local University of Minnesota Extension Educator for Stearns, Benton, and Morrison counties, and this has been today's Best Practices segment.
The phone rings, 8 o'clock on a September morning. The voice of the smiling caller says, "Hey, JoAnn, there's a box here, a box with holes in it. Got your name on it." Oh my goodness. I throw on my hat and I drive to the post office. The woman with the recognizable voice comes out with the box. She says, "Here, have fun." I hold the box up to my ear, but there's no sound. Oh no. Are they alive in there? I mean, they've been in this box coming from California for 2.5 days now. No food, no water. What am I going to see when I open this box? But I hurry home. I open it. I peer inside. and there are 2 little black Kyoga sisters, 2 little black ducks looking up at me and squinting at the first light they've ever seen at 3 days old. I scoop them out of the box, 1 in each hand. Furry little creatures. "Hello, you're Annie. And this one's Nettie." Never too early to start teaching names to your animals. I dip their beaks into water to teach them how to drink, and they take it from there. Oh, that baby chick feed feels pretty good in empty tummies. Their first 2 weeks are spent in a Rubbermaid tote in my bathroom under a heat lamp. Pretty soon they get a little too rambunctious for that tote, and I put them in a playpen right here in my office beside my computer, but that doesn't last so long because they get a little too rambunctious for that too, and pretty soon it's time to transition them to their own special little insulated house in my garage under a heat lamp. Now, telling them apart is impossible. They're identical sisters. But there is a way. Since I'm the mom now, there is a way to tell them apart. Annie is so timid. She follows me so closely that I almost step on her, so I have to be really careful. But she doesn't like me to hold her. Nettie, on the other hand, is bold. She fiercely protects her favorite treat, mealworms. Oh, she loves those. She also loves for me to hold her. It's their 5-month birthday. Their 5-month birthday. And on that day, I think they are as surprised as I am in that they have laid their first egg. And when you have a black duck, you get a black egg. Well, just the shell, of course. What a shock. Annie and Nettie are almost 9 months old now. They have the run of the backyard that's fenced. They love playing with my dog Charlie and my cat Mindy. Sometimes it's kind of a 3-ring circus out there. But other times, when they come, when I call them, I'll say, "Here, Annie, here, Nettie." They come running. And if I want them really quickly, I just say, Annie, Nettie, treat. And they come running faster than ever. You know me. I'm the farm kid who never wanted to grow up. And there's just something about having your backyard filled with a dog, a cat, and 2 ducks. It is so peaceful. I have to have animals. They do bring peace to my life, as I'll bet they bring peace to your life too. Nettie came to meet you all. Usually she tucks her beak inside my shirt. Today I think she's a little nervous. And at only 9 months old, she's already turning a bit white. Are you getting old already, Nettie? She makes happy little sounds, but she loves to be held. Maybe you would like a duck.
Through our passions, we share who we are with others. Connecting to our neighbors through our common interests forms a bond and motivates everyone to work a little harder to ensure that our lives are the ones we want to live. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thanks for watching Farm Connections.